Hi, I'm really glad you're here. This is an original Tales for Story. If you enjoy family drama with a little Mother Bear energy, then you are in the right place. Alright, let's get into it.
On the bus, my 6-year-old clutched my hand and whispered, "Mama, I'm scared." I asked why. She nodded toward the floor and whispered, "There's something under the seat." I looked and froze in horror. I didn't cry. I did this. The next morning, my in-laws regretted everything. We call the van the bus. Not because it's actually a bus, because it's not. It's a minivan with questionable carpet and a smell that can only be described as cracker dust and old emotions. But when you have 4 kids, you stop pretending you drive a car and start accepting you operate public transportation. That Sunday, I was the driver. I'm always the driver. I tell myself it's because I'm responsible. The truth is, I can't handle other people braking. And also, if I'm in control of the wheel, I can't blame anyone else when my life goes off the road. My name is Lauren, and I was coming home from visiting my ex-in-laws. Yes, ex-in-laws. And yes, that sounds as exhausting as it is. My ex-husband's parents, Patricia and Thomas, were the kind of people who like to refer to themselves as family-oriented, which is a fancy way of saying they believed their opinions should be considered a natural law. Family is everything, Patricia liked to say, with the same tone people use to say, oxygen is necessary. I went anyway, because they were still the grandparents, because my kids loved them, because I was tired, because it felt easier than the fight that always followed the word no. I had 4 kids in the back. Lucy, my oldest daughter, 12 going on 42, Noah, 10 and constantly negotiating like he was paid commission, Ethan, 8, sweet until he wasn't, and Ivy, my youngest, 6, tiny and soft and still young enough to think adults knew what they were doing. We were an hour into the drive home when the pressure started building behind my eyes. Not from the kids. Shockingly, they were quiet. Half asleep, half fighting in slow motion over an invisible boundary line. No, the pressure was from the whole trip. The forced smiles, the comments that weren't comments, the way Patricia watched me like she was waiting for me to slip and prove whatever theory she'd been collecting about me since before I even had wrinkles. I told myself, it's fine. You survived. You're leaving. Just get home. We made it across the state line. I did not celebrate. I just exhaled through my nose like I had been holding my breath since marriage. And then, because the universe loves timing, we hit the bathroom emergency. "Mom," Ethan said, polite and urgent. "I need to pee." Noah immediately panicked. "I also need to pee." Lucy didn't need to pee. Lucy never needed anything. Lucy simply observed. "We should stop now," she said, as if she was the family manager and I was an underperforming employee. And Ivy, who had said nothing for most of the drive, whispered, "I don't like this." "What?" I asked. She shrugged. "I just don't." "Great. Love that for us." I took the next exit and pulled into a gas station that looked like it had been built specifically for people in crisis. Bright lights, too many windows, and a parking lot full of exhausted parents performing miracles with minimal caffeine. Bathroom trip complete, snacks acquired, children reassembled like little chaotic dolls. We climbed back onto the bus, my minivan, and I did the head count on autopilot. Lucy, Noah, Ethan, Ivy. Doors shut. The world outside went quiet. I slid the key in, ready to leave, when Ivy reached forward. She clutched my hand so hard it hurt and whispered, "Mama, I'm scared." My chest tightened. I kept my face neutral. "Why?" I whispered back. Ivy didn't look at me. She nodded toward the floor and whispered, "There's something under the seat." A second passed where my brain tried to make it normal. A toy. A sock. A spider. But Ivy's fingers didn't let go, so I didn't start the car. I turned like I was checking a seatbelt and said softly, "Nobody move. Don't touch anything." Lucy's head snapped up. "Mom?" "Just buckle," I said. "Now." Noah leaned forward, already trying to see. Ethan went silent. I unbuckled and crouched between the rows, my knees cracking like a warning, and reached under Ivy's seat. My fingers hit something that wasn't floor. A bag. Not dropped. Not slid. Wedged up into the rails like someone had put it there on purpose. I pulled it out just enough to see it clearly. Then I unzipped it. Just enough. I looked. And I froze in horror. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even breathe right for a second. Because the kids were watching. Because Ivy was shaking. I zipped it shut with hands that suddenly didn't feel like mine and shoved it out of sight. Lucy stared at me like she was memorizing my face. "What is it?" Noah whispered. "Nothing," I said too fast. "Nobody looks. Nobody touches." My voice came out calm anyway, like it belonged to someone braver. I smiled at them, too bright, too wrong, and said, "Okay, seatbelts." Click. And then I got behind the wheel and said, "We're going." "To home?" Ivy asked. "Yes," I said. "To home." I pulled out of the gas station lot and turned the van around. No explanation. No dramatic speech. Just a hard, clean turn. As if my body had decided for me, not one more mile in the wrong direction. And then I drove. Fast enough to feel the sweat start under my hairline. Slow enough not to get pulled over. My hands were slick on the steering wheel. I kept checking the mirrors like I expected sirens to appear out of nowhere. Every mile felt too slow. I didn't tell the kids anything. I couldn't. I didn't even let myself think the word for what I'd seen. I just drove like I could outrun the consequences. A few minutes later, we crossed back over the state line. No border checkpoint. No gate. Just a sign and a change in the way my lungs finally remembered how to expand. I pulled into the first safe lot I saw. Bright lights, other cars, cameras. I parked. And only then did I realize I had been holding my breath. Sweat cooled on my neck. My heartbeat hammered like it had been doing cardio without me. The kids were quiet now. Even Noah. Lucy stared at me like she was filing a report. Ethan hugged his backpack. Ivy pressed her forehead against the window. Relief hit me. Thin. Fragile. Because I still hadn't said the words out loud. And if you're wondering why I turned around without a word, you have to understand what my ex's parents were capable of long before that day. I met Brian at university. Not in a romantic, we bumped into each other and dropped our books, and then fate played a violin way. More in a practical, we were both broke and stressed, and he offered me half his sandwich way. He was steady. That was his whole thing. When everyone else in our circle was dramatic, changing majors every semester, dating people with red flags like it was a hobby, Brian just existed. He studied. He worked part-time. He remembered to pay his parking tickets. He listened when I spoke, which, after growing up in a family where everyone spoke over each other like it was competitive sport, felt like intimacy. He had one constant, though: his parents. Patricia and Thomas lived in another state, his hometown. The place he talked about like it wasn't just geography, but a responsibility he carried. "My parents need me," he'd say casually, like other people said. "I have to do laundry." At first I thought it was sweet. Then I met them. Patricia had the kind of smile that looked warm until you realized it never reached her eyes. Thomas was quieter, the type to let Patricia do the talking, but still somehow make you feel judged through silence. They were polite. They were friendly. They were also, immediately, concerned. About me. About my family. About how far Brian lived from them. As soon as our relationship became serious, they treated it like a detour. "You'll finish school and come back," Patricia would say to Brian like it was already decided. To me, it was subtler. "We're sure she's nice," she'd say, with the pause that means the opposite. "But you belong here." They were old-fashioned in a way that made my skin itch. The wife should follow the husband. The son should come home. The family should stay close. And in their minds, I wasn't just dating their son. I was the reason he wasn't where they wanted him. Brian didn't argue. Not because he agreed, because he didn't argue with them. Ever. He'd learned early that peace was purchased with compliance. We got married anyway. We built a life where we were. Jobs, mortgage, a house that always needed something fixed. Then kids. 4 of them. Because apparently my coping mechanism is escalating responsibilities until I can't think. Lucy came first, sharp, observant, born with the face of someone who already disapproved of our choices. Then Noah, who came out negotiating. Then Ethan, sweet and sensitive, my emotional barometer. Then Ivy, my soft little shadow. Brian was a great dad, present, patient. The kind who could braid hair while making pancakes and not complain. I thought we could handle the in-law problem. I thought love and distance would be enough. It wasn't. Because they didn't stop. They just adjusted. Brian had a sister, Samantha, who lived closer to Patricia and Thomas. Samantha was the golden child, the favorite. She could do no wrong. She could drop commitments, make mistakes, disappear for months, and still receive praise. Brian, meanwhile, was the good son, the reliable one, the one who was expected to fix what wasn't working. When Patricia and Thomas needed something, it wasn't a request. It was a test. If Brian said no, he wasn't just refusing money or time. He was failing love. So he didn't say no. At first it was small, a few $100 for a car repair, help with a medical bill. Just until next month. Then it became constant, the same cycle. New crisis, same expectation. And we had 4 kids. 4 kids isn't theoretical. 4 kids is groceries and shoes and school fees and the kind of exhaustion that sits in your bones. I pushed back, not angrily, not dramatically, just practically. "We can't," I'd say. "Not like this." Brian would sigh. "They're my parents," he'd say, and the guilt in his voice would make me feel like I was asking him to abandon an orphan. It wasn't just the money. It was the way their needs always mattered more than ours. Our family felt like something Brian maintained in between servicing theirs. Then the infidelity campaign began. To be clear, I have never cheated on him in my life, but my in-laws did everything they could to convince him otherwise. It started with concern. From what I know, Patricia would say sentences like, "We don't want to worry you, but..." and so on. Then it upgraded. They would claim that someone saw me, a friend from church who lived near us, a cousin who supposedly recognized my car. It was always just concrete enough to stick, and just vague enough to be impossible to disprove. At first, Brian brushed it off. Then he heard it again, and again, and again. And slowly, he changed. At first, it was little jokes that didn't feel like jokes. "Who was that texting you?" he'd say, smiling too casually. "Where were you?" he'd ask, as if I hadn't already told him. Then came the refrain. "My mom said," my dad said. Every suspicion came with their fingerprints on it. I wasn't fighting with my husband. I was fighting with a committee. And eventually, it broke something in me. The breaking point wasn't a screaming match. It was worse. It was a quiet moment where Brian looked at me, really looked at me, like he didn't know me, like I was a stranger in my own kitchen. "If you'd just be honest," he said. I remember standing there with a dish towel in my hands, the kids in the other room, and feeling something cold settle in my chest. "I am honest," I said. And he didn't say, "I believe you." He said, "My parents wouldn't lie." That was it. Not because I didn't love him, because I couldn't live with someone who trusted his parents more than he trusted the woman raising his children. I drew the boundary. Either you trust me, or you don't get to be my husband. He couldn't cut his parents off. Not then. So I left. The divorce wasn't a war. It was a slow, sad agreement that we were bleeding out and pretending we weren't. Afterward, we co-parented. Cold, functional, professional. From what I know, Brian still sent his parents money. Like a lot of money. He still defended them. Still tried to keep peace. I told myself I could manage it, that the kids deserved grandparents, that I could tolerate Patricia's smile and Thomas's silence for a few weekends a year. So I kept it controlled, until the day I found that bag under Ivy's seat. Back in the driver's seat, sweat cooling on my neck, I stared out at the parking lot and thought, they've tried to ruin me before. They just never went this far. I stayed parked for exactly as long as it took to get my hands to stop shaking, which is to say, not long at all, because I'm a mother of 4 and my body has learned to function through panic like it's another household chore. I didn't tell the kids the truth. Not yet. I told them we had to turn around because I forgot something. Lucy didn't buy it, obviously. Noah tried to. Ethan looked worried. Ivy stared at her shoes like she was carrying guilt in her backpack. "Are we in trouble?" she whispered. "No," I said. "You did the right thing." I waited until Noah and Ethan were busy unwrapping snacks like it was a competitive sport, and Lucy was staring out the window like she was refusing to be part of this family. Then I leaned back toward Ivy, low enough that only she could hear me. "How did you know it was there?" I asked. Her shoulders rose like she was bracing for a hit. "I saw Grandma," she whispered. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. "She put it under my seat," Ivy said, eyes still fixed on her shoes. "She said it was a secret." A pause. Then, even quieter. "Grandpa said the police would take us." Something cold settled behind my ribs. I nodded like I was calm. Like this was information you could just casually absorb and continue existing. "Okay," I said softly. "Thank you for telling me." Then I drove to the nearest police station on the safe side of the line. I didn't even let myself think about how insane that sentence would have sounded to me a week ago. "Hi, officer. I found something horrifying under my child's seat, and I'm trying not to collapse." At the station, I kept my voice flat, controlled. Because I've learned that when you're a woman in the middle of custody life, the moment you sound emotional, people start translating your fear into instability. I told the desk officer the simplest version. "My name is Lauren. I found an unknown package in my vehicle while traveling with my children." I didn't say the word. Not yet. I explained that I'd just left a visit with my ex-husband's parents and that my 6-year-old, my youngest, told me she'd seen her grandmother put something under her seat and told her not to tell me. I said, "I don't know why it was there. It isn't mine." I gave them the tote. Still zipped most of the way because I wasn't about to start rummaging like I was sorting laundry. The officer asked a few questions. "Where were you traveling from? When did you notice it? Did you touch anything inside?" "No. No. No." And then he asked, carefully, "Do you know what it is?" I stared at his badge like it could give me courage, and then I said it. "THC edibles," I whispered, like saying it louder would summon a demon. Not loose weed, not some huge cartoon bag that would smell like a concert. Sealed packaging. Branded. The kind of thing that's perfectly legal to buy in Colorado, where Patricia and Thomas live, and very much not legal back home in Wyoming. That's when it clicked in the most nauseating way. This wasn't an oops. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a setup. They knew exactly where I was driving. They knew I'd crossed that line with my kids in the car. And if those edibles had still been under Ivy's seat when I got stopped, if I got stopped, it wouldn't have mattered that I didn't buy them, didn't want them, didn't even know they were there. It would have been in my vehicle, with my children. I still didn't know what their endgame was, whether they planned to call it in, whether they were counting on a random stop, whether they just wanted the possibility hanging over my head like a threat. But I knew one thing for sure. They didn't put it there for fun. The officer's face didn't change much, but his eyes sharpened. "Okay," he said, and I could hear the shift in his tone. Not panic, but seriousness. They took my statement. They logged it. They gave me a report number. Paper trail. The most beautiful 2 words in my world. By the time I walked back out, my hands were steadier. Not because I was calm, because I now had something solid, something official, something that wasn't just my word against Patricia's perfect smile. I called my lawyer from the parking lot, gave her the report number, told her everything in clipped sentences. She didn't gasp. She didn't say, "Oh my God." She said, "Do not contact them. Do not respond to them. Document everything. We're filing emergency restrictions." My mouth went dry. "Emergency restrictions?" I repeated. "Yes," she said. "This is an endangerment issue and an interference issue. We're moving." And for the first time since the gas station, I felt something other than fear. I felt anger. Because this wasn't gossip. This wasn't Patricia's passive-aggressive comments. This was a trap with my kids in the back seat. I loaded the kids back into the bus and checked under every seat like I was scanning for landmines. I buckled them too tightly, Noah complained. Ethan asked if we were okay. Lucy watched me quietly like she was storing evidence. I didn't call Brian. Not because I didn't want help, because I didn't trust his reflex. His reflex had always been, defend them. So I drove. Back toward home. Back toward the state where those edibles would have been a very different problem if they were still in my car. The sign flashed past. The scenery shifted. And my chest tightened again. I drove perfectly. Not 1 mile over. Not one weird swerve. I drove like someone was grading me. 15 minutes later, the lights hit my mirror, red and blue. Something in me went cold. I pulled over slowly. The officer approached. Professional. Neutral. "Ma'am," he said. "We received a call with concerns about possible impairment and the safety of the children in the vehicle." Of course. Of course there was a call. I kept my face calm, but my heart was trying to climb out of my throat. "I'm not impaired," I said carefully. He looked at me, looked at the kids, looked at the bus like it was a crime scene. "Do you have anything in the vehicle we should know about?" he asked. And this is where I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because if I didn't laugh, I might scream. "Officer," I said, "I just made a report across the line about an unknown package I found in my car. It's not in the vehicle now." His eyes flicked. "You made a report?" "Yes," I said. "I have the report number. I can give it to you." That was the moment his tone shifted slightly. Less suspicion, more attention. He asked a few more questions. Where had I been? Who was with me? Were the kids okay? Then he asked, "Do you consent to a search of the vehicle?" And I hesitated, because logically, there was nothing. I had handed it over. But fear isn't logical. Fear said, what if there's more? What if you missed something? What if they hid it better than you thought? I swallowed. "Yes," I said, because refusing felt like something guilty people did, and I was tired of living in a world where guilt is assigned. They searched, quickly, methodically. The kids stared out the window. Lucy's jaw was clenched. Ethan looked like he might cry. Noah whispered, "Are we going to jail?" And I told him quietly, "No." They found nothing. The officer didn't apologize exactly, but he softened. "Drive safe," he said. I drove home shaking, not relieved. Furious. Because now I knew it wasn't just the tote. It was the call. Someone had wanted me stopped on the wrong side. Someone had wanted me searched. The next morning, I called my lawyer again. "I was pulled over," I said. "They said they got a report." There was a pause on the line. Then my lawyer said very quietly, "Okay, that helps." My skin prickled. "That helps?" I repeated. "It supports intent," she said. "It supports a pattern. We'll document it." I sat on the edge of my bed, phone pressed to my ear, listening to my kids breathe down the hall. They didn't just plant it. They tried to make sure I got caught, and now I was ready for what came next. My lawyer moved fast. I didn't even fully understand everything she filed, and honestly, that was the point. I wasn't trying to become a legal scholar. I was trying to keep my children safe and my sanity intact. She filed for emergency restrictions related to Patricia and Thomas, my ex-in-laws, asking the court to temporarily block their contact with the kids, tighten exchange rules, and strip them from anything that gave them access. School pickup lists, emergency contacts, the invisible little loopholes people ignore until someone drives a truck through them. By mid-afternoon, my phone rang. It was Brian, and he didn't even say hello. "What the hell is this?" he snapped. I stood in my kitchen, one hand on the counter like I needed it to hold me upright. "What?" I said. "Is what?" "Don't do that," he said. "I got paperwork. No contact with my parents. Restricted contact. Are you serious, Lauren?" His voice was raw with disbelief. "Brian," I said, keeping my voice steady, "they put something under Ivy's seat." He scoffed. "No." "I filed a police report," I said. "No," he repeated, louder, like volume could change facts. "I got pulled over after I crossed back," I said. "They said they got a call." Silence. Then he exploded. "You always hated them," he said. "You always looked for reasons. They're not perfect, but they're good people. This is insane." I didn't argue. I didn't defend my character. I didn't beg. I just said, "This is real. My attorney is handling it." He cut me off, voice sharp. "You're trying to keep the kids from my family." Then he hung up, mid-sentence. I stared at my phone for a full 10 seconds. One cold thought flickered in. What if he's part of it? Then another, quieter thought followed. That anger sounded too real to be coordinated. I went back to mother mode. Because mother mode doesn't care about your existential dread. It cares about lunches and homework and the fact that Noah had lost his other shoe again, like he was shedding them for sport. One of the kids, Ethan, asked me softly, "Is Grandma mad?" I looked at him and felt my heart crack in a very specific place. "You're safe," I said. "That's all you need to know." That night, after bedtime, I messaged my lawyer. Brian called angry, documenting. Then there was silence. A couple days where nothing happened. No texts from Patricia, no calls from Thomas, no flying monkeys, just the feeling of being watched by the calendar. I started to think, irrationally, maybe it was over. Maybe the legal filing scared them into disappearing. Maybe the universe, for once, was done with me. Then, 3 days later, there was a knock at my door. I opened it and found Brian standing there, pale, like he hadn't slept, like someone had reached into his chest and rearranged his beliefs. My first instinct was defensive. "What?" I said flatly. "Do you want?" He didn't argue. He didn't accuse. He just held out a piece of paper. A printout. "Lauren," he said, and his voice sounded wrong, too quiet. "I went to their house." I didn't move. "I asked them," he said. "I asked them straight." He swallowed hard. "And they tried to justify it." I felt my heartbeat slam once. Heavy. He held the paper out again. "I have access to their accounts," he said, like it was a confession in itself. "I've been paying things for them for years. Bills, orders, whatever they can't manage. I know their logins." Of course he did. Of course the dutiful son had the keys to the kingdom. "I checked," he said, and now his voice shook. "I checked their purchase history." He pointed to a line on the printout. A date. A product name. A brand. A quantity. A location. All matching the thing I hadn't wanted to say out loud. "They bought it," he whispered. "Right before your visit." I took the paper with fingers that didn't feel like mine. Then I pulled out my phone and opened the photo I'd taken at the police station. Just the corner of the packaging, enough to prove I wasn't imagining it. I compared them. Same branding, same type, same disgusting little confirmation that reality was real. I looked up. Brian was watching my face like he needed to see the truth land in someone else's eyes so he could believe it himself. "They admitted it?" I asked, voice thin. He nodded once. "They said," he swallowed, "they were trying to protect the kids." A laugh almost came out of me, not because it was funny, because it was obscene. Brian's face tightened like something inside him had snapped into place. "If they could do this," he said, and his voice went hard, "what else have they done?" He looked at me like he was seeing our whole marriage in reverse. The money fights, the accusations, the committee in our living room. He shook his head. "I believed them," he said, and the shame in his voice was raw. "For years." He stood there on my porch, pale and wrecked, holding the last thread of the life we'd had. "I'm done," he said finally. "I'm done with them." I didn't know what to say. He didn't ask for forgiveness perfectly. He didn't deliver a polished apology. He looked like a man who'd just realized his parents weren't safe people. "I can't fund them," he said. "I can't protect them. I can't let them near the kids." Then he turned and walked back to his car like he couldn't stay in my doorway another second without collapsing. I closed the door and stood in the quiet holding the paper. The fight hadn't ended, but it had changed shape, and somewhere deep in me, under the fear, a different feeling started to rise. Relief. 6 months later, Patricia and Thomas don't get to play grandparents anymore. The DA charged them with tampering with physical evidence and false reporting. They took a plea. 18 months probation, 200 hours community service, $2,500 in fines and fees, and a no-contact order that covered me and the kids. Brian filed his own motion to add Patricia and Thomas as restricted contact in the parenting plan. The judge signed it. No unsupervised contact, and they were removed from all school pickups by emergency lists. Brian apologized the way I'd needed for years. Not, "I'm sorry you felt this way." Not, "My parents meant well." Just, "I believed them over you." He asked if we could ever try again. I told him the truth. "I forgive you, but I'm not rebuilding the marriage." And it turns out forgiveness doesn't always mean going back. Sometimes it means finally being able to stand in the same room without bleeding. We did our oldest's birthday together. Same room, no tension, no fights. The kids noticed. They stopped asking who was mad at who. When Brian cut his parents off financially, they couldn't keep the lifestyle. Patricia and Thomas sold the house and moved into a small rental back in town. We're not together. We're finally allies. So tell me, did I go too far or not far enough? Let me know in the comments. And if you're new here, subscribe for more.